Okay, Mordecai, we are live and ready to go.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Well, good morning to everybody. The time now is 10:08 a.m. Central Standard Time. This is the ApplyTexas Advisory Committee meeting. The date is February 10th, 2021, and excited to have an opportunity to certainly work with you all on today. Next slide, please. We're going to go over a few housekeeping rules as we prepare for the day and assist to ensure that each and every one of you all are successful as we go throughout today's business. And you will see here in the slide that should be showing at this point by slide share is our meeting guidelines. So number one, this meeting is being streamed live and recorded. So please keep that in mind, especially in regards to your camera activity, your microphone activity, as we're all working, many of us working remotely and from home. Mute microphones when not speaking. Always keep your camera on is appreciated, but certainly we understand if for any reason that you may have to stop camera to take care of a matter. The Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board staff will establish a quorum through a roll call. Ms. Jamie Hansard will be leading us through a bit of that roll call initially on this morning. Each member should identify himself or herself prior to speaking for the record, so be sure that you state your name. Wait for one person to finish before speaking. Otherwise, comments may be muddled or unclear, as I'm sure we all understand our internet connections and Zoom activity. And motions will be voted on by roll call. Also want to thank our tech team from THECB who's assisting us on this morning. We appreciate you all and thank you. Next slide, please. So at this time, we're going to have our welcome and introductions. I certainly want to introduce to this body and anyone who may be on this call or watching the recording. This is Jamie Hansard from Texas Tech University, who is now serving in the role as co-chair for this committee for our four-year institution. So certainly want to give her the opportunity to say some words and again, congratulate her on serving in this capacity. Jamie.
Thank you, Mordecai. Good morning, everyone. I'm very much looking forward to this meeting and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. At this point, I think we'll start roll call and confirm that we have a quorum. So I'm going to call your name and if you could acknowledge your presence at this meeting, if you could do that by saying here or something, but also raising a hand so that the staff has plenty of time to make sure to record that you're here. So we'll start with Mordecai Brown from St. Philip's College.
Here.
Paula Arredondo from Texas State Technical College.
Here.
Chantel Blake from Dallas College, Cedar Valley.
Here.
Hannah Deland from Lamar University.
Here.
Luis Franco from University of North Texas at Dallas. Okay. Laura Isdell from Lone Star College.
Here.
Rebecca Lothringer from the University of Texas at Arlington.
Here.
Scott Bennett from Lee College.
Here.
Kevin Davis from Stephen F. Austin State University.
Here.
Todd Fields from Collin College. Okay. Leah Hickman from Midwestern State University.
Here.
Billy Legal from the University of Houston at Victoria.
Here.
Darren Newton from the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley.
Here.
Indra Pelez from Houston Community College. Okay. Angie Taylor from Sam Houston State University.
Here.
Michelle Walker from Texas A&M University.
Here.
Let's see. Becky Sargent from Hardin-Simmons University.
Here.
Julie Vickery from Midland College.
Here.
And Miguel Wazlowski from the University of Texas at Austin.
Here.
And I'd also Tristan Pepper, our student representative.
Here.
Fantastic. I'd also like to recognize Graham Chapman and David Muck from the ApplyTexas technical team. And I'm not sure if we have anyone else from the technical team joining us, but I'd also like to recognize them as well.
We do.
Rebecca
Barry McClendon
Kinchy.
and Rebecca Kinchy.
Okay, so we have Rebecca Kinchy as well as with us. Was there anyone else from the technical team?
Barry McClendon from the technical team.
Perfect. Great. Thank you both. All right, so I believe at this point we do have a quorum.
Thank you so much, Jamie. We'll just move on into the review and adoption of minutes.
You all should have received these minutes in your meeting packets. If you'll go ahead and refer to them now, and we'll give you a few minutes to go over the meeting, to go over the minutes, and then let us know if there's any changes, and then Mordecai or Jamie will get them approved.
At this time, does anyone have any changes for the minutes? I think this is the first time ever we haven't had changes to the minutes. Okay, well, seeing that there are no changes, we'll now entertain a motion for the minutes. Would someone like to make a motion?
This is Angie Taylor, Sam Houston. I motion that we approve the minutes as is.
Thank you.
Julia Vickery, Midland College, I'll second.
Fantastic. All in favor of voting for the minutes, say aye with your hand, please. That way we can capture that. All right. Any nays? Okay, Michelle, was that a nay or a yay? I wasn't sure. It was a little delayed.
That was a yay.
Okay, perfect. So
Sorry.
with that, then with no nays, then we pass the minutes.
Thank you so much. I was laughing on this end, Michelle. I thought that you were, letting us know maybe. It was moving down a little slow. All right, everybody. Let's now move on to item number 3, update from Strategic Planning Committee. At this time, I believe that we'll have Mr. Miguel share some information with us.
Yeah, thank you, Mordecai. So hello, everybody today. Great to be here and great to see everybody. One of the things from our last meeting is that we were going to actually execute the survey that was intended for our students, parents, high school counselors, college, university representatives, and that actually was executed. And we received the final results by the end of January, and we've been under a process of evaluating all of that information. In total, I think we had a very strong response rate to those surveys, and we got a good representation from all of those different groups of people. We are in the process of still looking at that data. There was a substantial portion of it that was qualitative information that was provided. So there's a certain amount of coding and stuff that needs to happen with that to make it a legit analysis. So we have an individual at UT Austin that's working on completing that. And we expect that to be done in the next couple of weeks. The following this meeting, Sarah Wayne will be reaching out to schedule a meeting with the subcommittee so that we can go over in depth what those results are and give the opportunity to react to those results. And then there'll be a series of recommendations that can come from that. In general, I can say that ultimately, I think that, students, I don't think there's anything really large that we've seen so far that's from a student perspective, as this is massively, bad in any way. I think that it at least some of the initial information is that students would like to see an autosave feature. There's some questions related to web accessibility, and then just in general being able to understand the application a little bit better. It was interesting to see that of those students that completed ApplyTexas, there was a very small portion of respondents, 6%, that had also completed the coalition application. but 59% of the respondents had completed a common application. And so that is very useful for us because it allows us to have more of a comparative data. And clearly the common application is reaching more students in Texas than the coalition, at least amongst those that were respondents. There's some variation between what counselors and administrators from the schools reported as things that possibly needed improvement. And again, we're going to dive deeper into that in the subcommittee and attempt to understand what those things are, and then report that out in a way that can be part of the official record here. So we, again, in the next couple of weeks, we should have that completed and then be able to give that with hopefully a final report on this is where we would recommend going. Any questions on that? Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to just briefly bring up to the group here today is, you remember when we first started this process, we had Zach Taylor from UT Austin perform an analysis of the application. Now, Dr. Zach Taylor is part of the TREllis organization, and TREllis has commissioned him to essentially perform the same analysis again. And so Zach reached out to me last week and mentioned that he was doing this, and mentioned that he would potentially be able to provide us with a preview of what some of those changes are based upon what he initially had done versus now. And so if there's no objection, I'd like for Zach to just give a very brief sort of review of what the information that he's obtained from TREllis.
No objection at all. If anyone has any questions from Dr. Taylor, please use the raise hand function and we'll be sure to acknowledge you. Thank you. Dr. Taylor.
Great. Do I have screen sharing permission, Dr. Brownlee?
Tell you what, with a member of our tech team could.
Yep,
Okay, great.
I do. Here we go. Great. All right, so I should be sharing my screen now. Can everyone see? Give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Great. Cool. So I will cruise through this really, really quickly. Those of you who are not aware, I did a report on ApplyTexas 2 full years ago. So the application cycle of fall 2018 to spring 2019. And I presented that report to this same committee 2 years ago, as well as at TAC that summer. And so this is kind of the 2-year retrospective of how ApplyTexas has or has not changed, comparing it to Universal App, Coalition App, and Common App. So in the January 15th, 2019 version of the report, this is everything that I pulled from the application. And so I'm going to go through this very, very quickly, but I've hyperlinked that initial report, and I will send this PowerPoint to everyone so you'll be able to review these notes. If you have any follow-up questions, you can contact me. But I gathered everything from word count, how long it took to complete the application by minutes, number of clicks, translation, whether it was mobile optimized, accessible for people with disabilities, all this kind of stuff. I use a variety of different readability levels that have been kind of codified in the higher education literature. I used my own Wi-Fi connection to complete the application. I found that the Wi-Fi connection really does matter. And I also use TNON web accessibility software to audit each application beyond ApplyTexas, as well as Coalition, Common, and Universal. I use the exact same synthetic student profile. So I assumed the student went to McCallum High School, had 2 married parents, no siblings, and did not take any AP honors or dual enrollment classes. So I did not have to fill out college information. I was kind of applying as an FTIC. So the 2019 report results were these. So again, this was 2 years ago. ApplyTexas was the most difficult application to read. It was by far the longest by word count. It was also the longest by time. It took the longest time. It was not translated beyond English. It was not fully web accessible, and it was not mobile optimized. Whereas at the time, Common App and Coalition App were mobile optimized, but they were the only mobile optimized applications that I could find. So those were the 2019 report results for those of you who did not see or were not aware of the 2019 report. I'll give you just a few seconds to read that table on your own, and I can take questions afterward, no problem. Okay, so my other notes of 2019, ApplyTexas also was one of the most linguistically diverse applications. That mean there were lots of unique words per overall words. And also, as Miguel had mentioned earlier in the survey data that they're collecting, Common App automatically saved progress. Other applications required the user to click. And if you accidentally tap refresh, you lost all your progress on other application systems. So automatically saving was a definite strength of Common App 2 years ago. I found that internet speed greatly affects how quickly each application page loaded. Common Application was one of the largest applications. So actually ApplyTexas loaded faster than Common App did 2 years ago. But this year, the 2021 analysis, I'm finding that ApplyTexas is still a very small application by bit size. So it actually loads pretty quickly on computers. However, ApplyTexas at the time was not mobile optimized, and I estimated it would take me about an extra 2 hours to complete ApplyTexas because I'd constantly be pinching on my phone and then zooming out, pinching, zooming out to be able to complete the application fully on my phone from start to finish. I said in 2019 that institutions should probably have access to their application data to understand where students stopped out and the difficulty of each set of institutional questions, because ApplyTexas is customizable. Institutions ask different questions, getting an idea of how difficult questions are from school to school, getting the application translated, and then doing A/B testing with students. And again, I think Miguel is drilling at some of the information in the survey, asking students what is difficult, what is simple, what do you like, what do you not like, to give an idea of what students want and what's most user-friendly for the student perspective. My 2019 recommendations 2 years ago were that the application be mobile optimized, translated, web accessible, auto savable. There should be some analysis of click rate or hover rate just to get an idea of where students get stuck in the application and where they abort the application. Institutions should get push notifications, and students should get push notifications if they have incomplete applications. So I'll share a little bit more information in a second, but right now ApplyTexas does not do that. And it didn't do that in 2019. Integration with other data systems, how do we incorporate financial aid applications, maybe social media profiles, also high school transcript systems, how can that be integrated or nudged in the application for high school counselors to access? Those are my 2019 recommendations. And then could ApplyTexas be a smartphone application that would allow two-way nudging? So institutions could remind students to complete something. Students could build their profile slowly over time. And then maybe voice commands for students with disabilities to make the application more accessible. So 2021 now, here's the redux of the report. I'm again looking at all those applications. I'm also extending it in the full report to state application systems in California, Wisconsin, New York, Connecticut, Maine, and Montana to get an idea of what other state application systems are doing, not just nationwide common application systems. I'm still looking at word count, minutes to completion, number of clicks, readability level, whether it's translated, whether it's mobile optimized, whether it's web accessible. Basically, again, to understand how ApplyTexas has or has not changed and how it can be made a little bit more simple and a little more accessible. And again, these analyses now are current as of this last application cycle, so 2 years in advance. There's also a qualitative angle to this. So as part of the report that I'm publishing likely in March, I performed semi-structured interviews with executive leadership from public four-year systems of higher ed to get an idea of what they found was strong and weak about ApplyTexas, and then what those executive leaders would like to see changed or not changed about ApplyTexas. And I'm in the process of also interviewing executive leadership at community college systems because the needs are way different from the 2-year to the 4-year level. And that's what I'm really hearing from the community college folks, is that what may be good for the 4-year schools may not serve 2-year schools. And it's a common application. Of course, 60 by 30 is really prioritizing transfer. And we need to understand how ApplyTexas can best serve the 2-year folks as well. So here are the 2021 report results. Again, it's the exact same metrics as 2 years ago. ApplyTexas has actually gotten easier to read and is shorter by word count, but requires more clicks. However, it is not the clickiest application out there, the Coalition app requires way more mouse clicks because almost every single course, every single field is a fillable form, and it required a lot more clicks, a lot more drop-down menus. ApplyTexas actually has more fillable forms and fewer drop-down menus, and a drop-down menu actually requires 2 clicks. You click on the menu, you find your option, and you click again. It's a 2-click mechanism, whereas if you fill in the form, you just click once. However, you have the keystrokes where you have to type in the information too. It is still not translated, but it is one of these shorter applications. I found that the Coalition app took me almost 2 hours to complete. And again, using that synthetic student profile of graduating from McCallum High School, 2 married parents, no siblings, no AP, no honors, no dual enrollment. ApplyTexas became much more web accessible. So great job on the tech side, making the application more web accessible. It's not completely web accessible, but it's going in the right direction. However, ApplyTexas is the only application not to be mobile optimized. So almost every single application I found is fully completable on a cell phone and adjusts to the cell phone size and your tablet size. It's mobile optimized for both cell phone and tablet. What I found though is that the Universal, the Coalition, the Common were a little easier to start because the ApplyTexas application requires 55 fillable fields to create a profile. And that's name, email address, password, some demographics. The Universal app only requires 8 fillable forms. So I was able to start that application in about 2 minutes, where it took me about 15 minutes just to start the ApplyTexas application. So one of my recommendations is lowering that bar to just completing the profile and the account to complete the application, making that access bar a little bit lower. Here's the comparative analysis, putting this information all side by side for everyone. So you can see that ApplyTexas has become shorter and less clicky and more readable, which is great. However, it's still kind of not mobile optimized. I also found that ApplyTexas was not fully web accessible and still is not translated. However, I have not found a single application system that is fully translated. There are some application landing pages that are translated for information about how English language learners and their families can complete applications in alternate formats. But the application itself, the Common app, the Coalition app, the Universal app, Maine, Montana, Connecticut, Wisconsin, none of them are fully translated. So it just seems to be something in higher ed access that all college application systems tend to only be written in English, which I think is pretty problematic in Texas. But there are the comparative analysis, the 2019 version, and then the 2021 update. I'll give you just a few seconds to look at those tables and then I'll move on.
I think, and Zach, I think Claudette has her hand up right now for a question.
Yeah, Claudette.
Yeah, just a real quick question. Zach, did you use the same school or institution to do both analysis for ApplyTexas?
Yep.
Okay, so which one was the one you used last time?
Texas Christian.
Texas
Christian. Selected randomly. That was just selected randomly.
And it was for both the 2019 and the 2021 analysis.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Okay,
and same with the other applications too. It was just randomly selected, and I did the same school.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So other notes, ApplyTexas does not autosave. The other apps do now. Every other application does autosave. ApplyTexas didn't ask a COVID impact related question. The other application systems did, and other state system applications did too. The University of California system asked how COVID-19 impacted a student's academic record, personal, social life. ApplyTexas, like I said, as before, requires 55 fillable forms. You can see how the other common applications, the bar to access to create the profile is much, much lower. I was able to at least create a profile in less than 2 or 3 minutes. It took me a lot longer to at least start the ApplyTexas application. Other applications asked for college, and then you can complete the entire application without selecting college again. Whereas ApplyTexas asked me for institution type, and then the application, and then college information again. And I found that at least the question order and the logic of the questions was a little bit more linear. for other application systems. Other apps too did not require as many demographics, parent information, extracurricular. I was actually able to click through most all that information. Now in the qualitative analysis where I was interviewing some folks, that becomes problematic because institutions need information to do, you know, course placement, to do financial aid awarding. There's a lot of processes on the institution end that ApplyTexas gathers the info for. But in other common application systems, I was able to bypass a lot of stuff, like almost half the stuff, just to complete the application. I was looking for minimum to complete the application. So minimum forms, minimum clicks, that kind of thing. Other applications were a lot less clicky because they didn't require as many demographics and parent information, extracurriculars, that kind of thing. In terms of preliminary qualitative analysis, so very preliminary because I've not spoken with everyone yet, everyone agreed, who I spoke with, thought that ApplyTexas is strong because it's widely used, it's cost effective, it's a known entity, so high school counselors know to talk about ApplyTexas in Texas, and the support team is very responsive and adaptive to folks' needs. Everyone mentioned something about that without my provoking. Someone every single time mentioned one of those categories. However, across the board, everyone mentioned that it looks outdated or archaic. It's not overly user-friendly, it's not mobile-friendly. And a lot of folks mentioned some need to do institutional reporting. The folks that I talked to about the Common application, they get reports from the Common App about who's applying, when they're stopping out of the application, and ApplyTexas doesn't provide that level of reporting. Or the folks weren't aware of how to access the ApplyTexas data to do their own self-reporting. So that was a weakness that everyone across the board said something in those categories. All executive leadership agreed that the application should be translated into at least Spanish, be mobile optimized, be web accessible, and be auto savable. So it was across the board agreement that those 4 categories should probably be taken care of. However, a ton of disagreement because everyone needs a little something different. How much information ApplyTexas should require. So there were discussions about how to make ApplyTexas shorter or simpler, but simplifying the application then shifted the information burden from the student to the institution. So every single item you don't ask a student for, the institution has to ask on the back end when they're doing the enrollment management process. And there was some tension there. What information was necessary to make a decision? Some systems was very, very simple. I need your name, your email address, what high school you attended, your coursework. And that was really about it. When other university systems needed a lot more information to say yes or no. And then the tension between, are students going to self-report grades to make a quicker decision, or do you need the official transcript to make the official decision, and how quickly can the official high school transcript be uploaded? Some folks said self-reporting is immediate. When we want the immediate information, we'll verify high school transcript information on the back end. Other folks said, we'd really like to have the official thing as soon as possible, but sometimes there's a days-long lag, a week-long lag, a month-long lag, and we never get that transcript. So the tension between, should ApplyTexas allow self-reporting, or should it be integrated into some transcript system that high school counselors can access to upload student transcripts on a student's behalf, or some sort of automated system there? So a lot of the 2021 recommendations are actually just echoed from 2019. Probably should be mobile optimized, translated, web accessible, auto savable. There should be some sort of analysis of when students abort the application, where they get stuck, to inform institutions on how difficult questions are, or what questions students may not feel comfortable with. I talked with a lot of the folks in the interviews about citizenship, military status. Like, those are really drilling at personal identities that students may not want to disclose right away, or they may want to disclose in a different format. Push notifications for incomplete apps. Students should be pinged by email when they don't complete, and institutions should know how many students aren't completing as well. I added in red one more recommendation about some sort of data transfer system between high school transcripts, and especially it gets tricky if you're accepting out-of-state applications, but that was something that was consistently brought up in the qualitative interviews about how do we get accurate high school transcript information the fastest way possible. Should ApplyTexas be a smartphone application? A lot of the folks I talked to said yes, they would love it to be a smartphone app. If students can complete the application on their phone, that'd be great. I had one person that I interviewed say that over 40% of their ApplyTexas applications were finished on a smartphone. And if it took me, someone with a PhD, over 2 hours to complete the application on the smartphone, imagine how difficult it might be for a student. And then just shortening the account creation process, 55 fillable forms, probably too long just to create a profile. Think about modern social media, how much it takes to create a profile, the ease of access and the barrier to access is so low. And then you get nudged for more information down the road. So that is all I have, at least for preliminary results. Miguel and Claudette and Jarrell and everyone involved, thank you for giving me the chance to present this preliminary stuff. I have linked the 2019 report on this slideshow, and Claudette and Miguel, I'll send you this slide deck so you can share it with the group. And then I will follow up with a full report that's going to be, proofread, and it'll look a lot prettier than this just very plain PowerPoint sometime in March. And that'll have comparative analyses of not only ApplyTexas and the other common applications, but Apply Maine, Apply Montana, the University of California and Cal State System apps, University of Wisconsin, Connecticut, Vermont, the Common Black application. It's a lot more in-depth. And I also get into other in-depth features like how fast the page loads and the bit rate of the page to understand how internet friendly, how mobile friendly, how quickly a student could access the application from a low speed or a dial-up internet connection, because that may be an access issue as well. So with that, I'm done and I can take anyone who has any questions.
Once again, if anyone has any questions or comments, please be sure to use the raise hand feature. And if you have, for any reason, any difficulty finding that raise hand feature in the chat, let's see, do we have chat feature here? Looks like just raise hand is what we have, or you raise your hand to the camera. And I will be sure to acknowledge you as well.
Mordecai, I don't have a question, but I did want to let the committee know this was a very thorough and good overview of the report. We were expecting to add this as an agenda item in our next ApplyTexas Advisory Council meeting, a committee meeting in April, probably expected in April. So just like Zach mentioned, to go over the final results of his findings. So we thank you, Zach, for being here and being present to kind of give that overarching overview of what to expect.
Thank you, Claudette. Any other comments or questions? If you just raise your hand to the camera, I'll be sure to acknowledge you or use the raise hand feature. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Do one more sweep here. Okay, Miguel, do you have, thank you for that, Dr. Taylor. Miguel, do you have any additional information to share regarding these the strategic planning committee item?
Yeah, so all I wanted to say is, again, to thank Zach for providing this information. I mean, it's helpful to be able to get a preview of something that will be larger. I just wanted to note that, I mean, obviously there's a number of things that are in the works of being changed with ApplyTexas because of the change to AWS. So hopefully a lot of those things that Zach mentioned and that we're seeing in the survey will be things that will automatically be taken care of with that change. It's good to see that there are some positive changes and results from compared to last time. So again, a lot to chew on in the subcommittee on this, and I'm looking forward to Sarah Wayne will be getting something out to folks to schedule a meeting in the next few weeks. And so hopefully we will have everything so we can review together and think about some of the next steps. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Miguel, and thank you, Dr. Taylor. At this point, we'll hear an update from the Communications Committee, so I'll turn that over to Mordecai.
All right. Well, again, good morning, everybody. So really quickly, right before the holidays, the communications subcommittee team had met to discuss, along with David and Graham, just looking at some messaging, some opportunities to share some information, as well as prepare some correspondence that can go out to our community who utilize ApplyTexas to get some input after the holiday. a survey that was put together by Miguel through his leadership, and the strategic planning committee team that was formed and was distributed. I am aware of the distribution of that survey being sent through the TAC row distribution list, and Jamie was instrumental in ensuring that took place. Miguel, were there any additional distributions that you could share that we may not be aware of that you could share with us this morning?
I don't know offhand, Mordecai, but I can gather that information.
Okay, and we'll be sure to provide that next time. So that's what we're aware of. Looking forward to seeing what the results of that survey will yield. My understanding of the context of that survey, and should be taking it myself here. It deals with the experience. What has been our experience with ApplyTexas, and give some insight in that regard as Miguel continues to lead the efforts of strategic planning committee. That concludes my report, Ms. Jamie. Any comments or questions? Okay, I don't see any here. So let's just move forward then with an update from the ApplyTexas technical team. David.
Thank you, Mordecai. On the tech team update, for this particular agenda item, I'm going to be going through the first part of that, the current cycle updates and proposals. The first two are standing items that I've included on this list. The first is encouragement to any schools that would like additional application deliveries to reach out to us, and we can add you to 7 a.m., 12 p.m., and or weekends. And we also want to encourage more high schools and colleges to participate in the transcript request service that we're in collaboration with the Texas Education Agency. An update on the completed fall 2020 semester, we were down 4% in submitted applications from the prior year. 2-year submissions were down 11%. 4-year submissions were approximately the same. Notably, 2-year applications that were left in saved but not submitted status were up 14% from the prior completed fall semester. For the incomplete fall 2021 semester, we are currently down 12% in application submissions compared to the same time a year ago. 4-year submissions are down 7%, and 2-year submissions are down 30%. There has been improvement with application submissions in November, early November, we were down 35% across the board in application submissions. An update on the question that we added to 2-year and US freshman applications, asking for applicants to opt in to receive text messaging from the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board and AdmitHub. That question has been added, and we have received a smattering of positive feedback from applicants, both through our post-submission survey, and somebody tweeted and copied us on it. And then an update that fraudulent applications continue to be a problem for some institutions, particularly some of our 2-year schools. We are steadily doing our best as we get reports. We look into those reports, and if there are patterns we can identify, we put in additional efforts to combat that problem. But it is an ongoing issue. And that's all I've got for current updates.
Thank you for that, David. Are there any comments or questions for David?
David, I have a question on the fraudulent applications. Does that still primarily tend to be an issue with our 2-year schools? Or are we also seeing that with 4-year schools as well?
We've seen it with both. It's primarily 2-year schools, but we have seen it with both. And again, we have a suspicion that this is an effort to obtain .edu email addresses. That's just a suspicion. We don't actually, we don't know what they're up to. A lot of the times, the patterns we're seeing, it doesn't appear that it's always, it appears to be different actors, and it doesn't always appear to be automated. Sometimes it looks very much like it's someone sitting down and filling out a fake application.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, Miss Laura Isdell.
Hi. Last time we had talked about potentially calling together just an opportunity to have a discussion group among community colleges, just an optional thing, just to talk through like how are we identifying fraudulent applications, what things are we looking for, and so I wonder if we still want to maybe offer that just as an opportunity for two-year, well, either to come, but particularly for two-year colleges, we'd be happy to help facilitate that conversation because we're definitely seeing a lot just because we receive a lot of applications.
Is this a subgroup? Is there a consideration for a subgroup committee? Is that of interest to any other committee members?
See, Dr. Chantel Blake raised hand. I believe Scott Bennett, raised his hand. If anyone else raised your hand, please raise it back for me so we can acknowledge you. Laura, I certainly see your hand raised. Anyone else? Okay.
And Laura, will you be willing to lead that subcommittee?
Sure.
Like the other subcommittees, we can add, you guys can meet offline and have regular updates if that's something you're preferring. Does that sound like something you'd like to add to the agenda for next meeting?
Certainly I'd say, yeah, for the next meeting. I don't know if it is a need to have an ongoing standing meeting or not, but at least, yeah, sure, for the first time or for the next meeting.
Yeah, if you just want to convene, we have Scott Bennett and Dr. Chantel and just Blake. If you guys want to meet offline, coordinate that and then come back with, during this time, David will go over this part and we can review whatever information you'd like to share in the next meeting. It won't necessarily be a subgroup. It's just, like you said, an IDing different issues and then coming back to committee to find out some resolution.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Laura. Any other comments, questions? Okay, I don't see any hands. Jamie?
Yes, David, thank you for that update on our current cycle update. So let's move into item number 6, which is discussion and consideration of proposed changes to ApplyTexas forms or procedures. And so David, let's start with you on the future cycle proposals and updates.
Okay. Let's see, these first two. No, the first one of these is a carryover from last year, from last cycle. We had a proposal to add a grade received field to the education information section to facilitate the self-reporting of grades. Should I just run through all of these and then discuss them one by one, I guess?
I think that would probably be the easiest.
Okay.
And just a reminder, we have a few others joining the section. We have our colleague Mindy Nobles and Aaron Willig, who will also give some brief information. So before you go into any possible voting, we just need to make sure to hear from them. Thank you.
The next one was a proposal to add a question if the applicant enters a phone number and then identifies that number as a cell phone number. We want to add, or the proposal was to add a question to indicate that the institution uses text messaging to communicate important admissions information to prospective students. Your information is not shared with third parties and you may opt out at any time. So that was the second proposal. A third proposal is to add fields to the test score page to collect the Pearson Test of English scores. The fourth proposal is to provide a question that will allow students applying to public two-year colleges to self-identify in one of the Perkins V, is that Perkins 5 or Perkins V? I don't know, Claudette. Special populations categories and request available local services. And then the last proposal we had was to expand the option of collecting parent information questions to all application types. But the way it works now is US freshman applications, administrators have the option to include those parent information questions. If they do include them, the required questions, this proposal would be to expand that to all application types. But if they're not US freshman application types, don't require the applicant to enter that information. I think I explained that, what the proposal is correctly. And that's all I had as far as the proposals for changes.
David, thank you. Claudette, I know that one of our guests has a very short time period that they could join us. So do we want to move to that first and then we'll come back and talk about everything?
Yes, so I can go ahead and introduce my colleague, Erin Willig. We have two colleagues joining us today. Mindy Nobles was on our last meeting. She's going to present or be available for questions. She's revised the last Perkins request that David just mentioned. She has not yet joined us, but she will be here. She's going to be coming back. But I'll go ahead and introduce my colleague, Erin Willig. I asked Erin to join us today for a brief just overview of ADV, only because there was some discussion at the last meeting, some concerns about questions and maybe possibly conflicting information that may go out to institutions, compared to what the ADV tool is. So I wanted to give her an opportunity to do a brief overview of the tool, answer any questions, and kind of give you some information that might be helpful in understanding more about what the tool does. So Erin, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Claudette. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. Again, my name is Erin Willig. I'm the director of our virtual advising work. I do thank you all so much for your interest in ADV and the questions. Claudette shared some of the notes with me, and I definitely hear some of the concerns and want to make sure we address and make sure you understand the thoughtfulness with which we're going through about this project, and also some of the evaluation that we are doing to ensure that it's effective and reaching students in the way that we'd like to. So just as a little bit of brief background, as you may be familiar with, this was a project that we started a couple years ago in partnership with the University of Texas at Austin. At that point, it was kind of a demonstration-sized project, reaching a small number of students, helping us kind of test the concept. And at the beginning of the pandemic, the commissioner and others in our leadership agreed that we needed to scale this up to really help reach students and ensure that we could support students as much as we were able during what we knew would be a tough time for students as they're going through the application and entry to college process. So as was mentioned earlier in the call, last fall, we added a consent to the ApplyTexas application to allow students to opt in to this service. To date, we have about 150,000 students who've consented and who we are currently messaging. That number started around, I think it was the first list was around 60,000, and then we've kind of built up from there. So it depends on when they start their application. At this point, we've sent over 6.5 million outgoing text messages from the program, and 400,000 messages have come in from the students. That's about 44% of the students engaging with the bot, which is a pretty good engagement rate relative to other similar bots across the country being run by our vendor. So we're very pleased with that. And that's measured by the students sending at least one text message back to us in response to the messages that we are sending them. I also don't want to discount what we call the passive engagement, which is the students who are just receiving the information. They're not necessarily replying, but there is still evidence, there are studies, and there's lots of conversation happening amongst different groups who are doing these kinds of interventions about the fact that just receiving the messages, whether or not they reply back to us, that can be a way that students learn and are reminded about steps that they need to be taking. We also have a team of 5 virtual advisors. These are trained advisors who have previous advising experience in higher education and also have received a training very similar to what our ApplyTexas advisors receive. They back up the chatbot and provide one-on-one engagement and support for more personalized questions or more specific questions that the bot might not be able to answer. So far, they've engaged with they've had about 5,500 conversations with students. Some of those might be the same students who ask on multiple one day they are asking something about the FAFSA, and maybe a few weeks later they're asking about something else. So these could be repeat students, but those are individual interactions that they are having. We do follow a regular campaign calendar, and we work in partnership with our vendor AdmitHub to incorporate best practices around messaging. Typically each month we have an area of focus, either a theme or a challenge. So as an example, in October when we started our month, our first couple of weeks were about introducing ADV and helping the students understand how to use the tool. In November, we focused on compiling application materials, letters of recommendations, essays, et cetera, and also letting them know, of course, that FAFSA was open and TASFA. In December, we focused on submitting applications. And I know there was some concern about some of the institutions that have earlier kind of priority deadlines. And we did work with some students. We did have some students who messaged us, and we were able to provide them with information earlier on if they were asking about those priority deadlines. So our advisors are well aware of that. The message is focused on the general application timelines, but we are very aware of some of those differences and are able to respond to students when they have questions about that. In January, our theme, of course, was submitting their FAFSA or TASFA by the priority deadline. And this month, our theme is around helping students to complete at least one scholarship application on top of their FAFSA and TASFA. So moving forward in March, our plan is to focus on priorities and decision-making and starting to help students move towards kind of the next phase of the application process. So we're following accepted college access timelines and steps and milestones that really any high school counselor or college access program would be following, really nothing out of the ordinary in terms of what the college access timeline looks like. I want to reiterate what I think Claudette said in the last meeting, which is that the campaigns are general enough to stand alongside any messaging that the student might be hearing elsewhere or receiving even from a college. And I do have one anecdote that I want to share that I think was interesting. We have an evaluation partner, which I'll speak more about in a moment, in UTSA. And they have a high school intern that they're working with who actually happened to be a student who was also receiving messages from ADV. And she noted that she's getting the ADV text messages and the ones from the college where she applied. And she didn't find it confusing at all. She actually sometimes was like, not sure which one was which, but she didn't find that confusing. She thought of it more as the way she expressed it was more that it was about that it was so aligned that she sometimes couldn't tell which was which. And she was just like getting the messages that she needed to receive about the things that she needed to do. So just a single anecdote, but that's something I wanted to share. So on the evaluation front, I do want to note that this project is being pretty rigorously evaluated on 3 different fronts. So we have an internal team. I'm sure many of our internal evaluation folks you have met. And we are working in partnership with our vendor AdmitHub to do a quantitative analysis of things like student engagement, the action that they've taken. And then of course, once we have the numbers, which will take a little bit longer, but we will also be looking at enrollment and whether or not there is a difference if the student was opted into ADV and if they were not. So UTSA's Urban Education Institute is also our qualitative evaluation partner. They are going to be conducting some student interviews where they're going to be focusing on student and counselor perception of the tool and also helping us with continuous improvement metrics. So we're really excited to have them as partners and they'll be helping us a lot on that front. And then we are also partnering with the College Advising Corps to support our advisors and our advising team. So they are helping us think about and focus on the efficacy of our advisors, their training needs, and any improvements that can be made to our internal processes and program. We are also conducting regular student satisfaction surveys, which are kind of small, quick checkpoints with the students via text messages to ask them how we are doing, how they are doing in the process, and those kind of inform what we're doing in terms of messaging, but will also be things that we can report back on going forward to folks like you or any of the institutions or anyone else that that comes up that there's something that's interesting or applicable. So I'll mention that in the most recent in the most recent student satisfaction survey, most of the students said that the tool was helpful and they found it to be useful. And in a smaller sample that we did a small sample survey to students who had completed their applications and asked them what the most challenging part of their application was. And a small percent, about 8% of the students responded. This was a smaller response than we've seen in some of our other surveys, but I do think the results are interesting because they align with some of the things that Zach shared. And they also give us some clues about the things that we need to be communicating about. And these are not necessarily some of the things that I think came up as concerns in terms of alignment, but things that we can do outside of that. Like the most common answer was they struggled with writing their essays. And we had some pretty extensive campaigns around helping support students thinking through their essays and getting those drafted and working them through the process. So just an example of things that we can do that align with the things that students are saying that they need. Claudette, I don't want to take too much time. I know that we have a very quick spot on the agenda, but I have a lot of information that I could share. So maybe I'll just pause there and take any questions that you all have.
We'll go ahead and do questions real quick. And I have asked Erin to also be available at the last meeting of the year and probably to be announced, to be determined probably in April, as we've always done, so she can give a formal report and answer any questions. If you have any questions, you can email them to me or to Erin directly if you'd like, but we'll take questions now if you have any. Again, lots of information. Thank you, Erin. I know there's a lot more to share, but we're going to go ahead and move on because we have a shorter time period. But we thank you for being with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Erin. We've had a request for a 5-minute break, so we're going to take that now, and we'll start back at 11:10. So if everybody could be back at 11:10. It's 11:11 and we still have a few people that were waiting to join us, so we'll wait a few more minutes before we get started again. Okay, so I think we're all back, so we'll go ahead and get started. Claudette, would you like to introduce our next guest?
Yes, so we do have Mindy Noble. She's our colleague here at the coordinating board. She put in that request around the Perkins question last time. Mindy met with a small team or small group from the committee and some others external to the committee to kind of revise the request per the discussion from the last meeting. So I've invited Mindy to join us again to review that agenda or that request with the committee for consideration. And so she's available to answer questions or provide any other insight. And this is regarding, David, can you help me with that request again? It's Perkins 5, the question for Perkins 5.
Yes, the proposal is to provide a question that will allow students applying to public two-year colleges to self-identify in one of the Perkins 5 special populations categories and request available local services.
Mindy, did you have anything to add? Committee members, you all received this request with your materials as well. So if there's any questions, now is a good time to ask Mindy, or Mindy, if you want to share what your group discussed and what the changes were made from last request to this request.
I'm happy to share, Claudette. Thank you. The group included, as Claudette stated, a small group of two-year college administrators from this committee, as well as 2 invited members from the field who are student services professionals, an ACC representative and a Temple College representative. What the group worked to do, and before I even talk about that, I want to thank the members of this committee who served in this capacity. That was duty above and beyond, and we do appreciate it. What the committee worked to do was simplify the original form of the questions to make them more easily readable and easier to respond to on the part of a two-year college applicant who might fall into one of the special populations categories. The special populations categories you will require are statutorily defined by the federal Perkins 5 legislation. The other thing that the work did was to reduce this overall to 2 questions. Question 1, do any of these situations apply to your situation? And question 2, would you like to hear from somebody? Answering yes to both questions would then trigger outreach by the two-year colleges. And I'll finally say that this request to the committee came through Perkins staff but from community colleges directly. We heard this request more than once when we were conducting Perkins 5 stakeholder meetings in 2019 ahead of writing the new Perkins 5 state plan for CTE. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
So it doesn't look like we have any questions.
Okay.
So thank you, Mindy, for being available to answer questions on this requested proposal. The committee will consider your proposal and will possibly vote on adding it to the ApplyTexas application. And that'll be our next step. And whenever you're free to stay on the call and be available for any of that. I'm not sure if the committee wants to vote on this one or wait until the next meeting to vote, but that I will leave to you all.
I will leave deliberations to this committee. I'm happy to respond if Claudette wants to reach out to me via Teams. I'm happy to respond to any questions that do come up when you discuss it subsequently. Thank you again for your consideration of this request. Thank you again to those of you on the committee who were so helpful in helping us pare this down to something manageable and appropriate for the ApplyTexas 2-year application. I wish everybody a warm next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mindy. We appreciate that. So I think at this point, we should review all of the proposals that David presented and then what we heard, the request from Mindy, and discuss that and decide if we do want to vote at this meeting or would we prefer to wait until April. And then once we do that, I think we're going to have a presentation on AWS. So at this point, I would ask for preferences. What do we have any questions for David? And then how do we want to move forward? And Graham, I see that your hand's up.
I would prefer that we vote on future requests today so that we have sufficient time to implement them before the new cycle.
Great, thank you. So with that, I really do think the first thing would be, do we have any questions from what David presented earlier on the proposals and that we've received at this point?
Maybe I should go through them one by one.
Yeah, I think that might be helpful for everybody. Thank you, David.
So the first one, again, this was a carryover from last cycle that it was decided to delay a decision on. The proposal was to add a grade received field to the existing education information section to facilitate the self-reporting of grades. There's a section on the US Freshman app that asks for senior courses, and I think it was adding a grade to those fields, a grade received to those fields.
How much time or what is involved in doing that? You know, before we used to categorize requests,
Sure.
right, into the three
Sure.
different categories.
So if it's just adding a field to the existing section, that's not a huge undertaking. I know self-reporting of grades has come up several times. If it's a whole section on self-reporting of grades, that would be a significant endeavor.
So I would ask, is this a need that is just for that the University of Houston is seeking, or are there others that are interested in this? And keeping in mind what we learned from Dr. Taylor's presentation, of course, that we don't want to make the application more complicated or more difficult for a student. So I would open it up for questions.
That's a good question. This is Rebecca. Do we know if Coalition and Common App require grades? That's my first question. If Zach's still here, he'll know. don't think he's here.
Oh, he's here.
Oh yeah, Zach, when you were looking at Coalition and Common App, do they have a place where students can enter their final grade on their courses?
Yeah, I have a note made on that. Let me figure that out.
So while you look at that, my second question.
Coalition does.
Okay.
Coalition was unique though because they used pop-up windows. So it wasn't the form. Every single new course, you get a pop-up window and then you enter the information and you can enter grades. Common Application, you can enter courses and grades. And Universal App, coursework is optional, but if you do want to enter coursework, you can enter the title of the course and the rank.
Thank you, Zach. That actually leads to my second question, which would be, if we did add this as a field, would it say optional? So students would not have to fill it out in order to move forward. I think that whole section is optional, right, David?
Yes.
I'm kind of with Jamie on this. I mean, we just heard a whole presentation about how difficult Applied Texas is, but then also knowing that self-reporting is getting to be more and more popular. With it being optional, that's something that makes me feel a little bit better about it, because then they would just know by school if they need to put that information in there.
So I have a question. This is Michelle. So the request is for them to be able to enter their senior grades. So I guess that would only apply to a student who has actually completed their senior year. Correct?
It's a great point, Michelle. Because otherwise, so our students are applying and in their 7th semester, and most of us are using 6th semester grades, right? So it kind of cancels it out.
Yeah, I'm not sure how a senior grade is going to be helpful unless a student is applying very, very late. Mm-hmm. Which U of H, their deadline may be much later, and they may have found that students do apply May or June, but doesn't seem like it would be very helpful to too many schools.
No, speaking for Texas Tech, we would not ask for that information. Even if it was optional, we probably wouldn't do anything with it to receive it. So from my perspective, I wouldn't vote for this or want to use ApplyTexas technical team time on this. But are there any other thoughts?
This is Miguel from UT Austin. The only thing I can say is that, so they list their summer 2021 application, and the date for that is May 3rd, 2021. And fall 21 application, the date is May 31st, 2021 as the deadline. So my guess is they're still taking applications after the deadline, after grades would have been posted. And that's probably why they want it on there. An important note is that when they click on apply, it actually goes to the common application.
That is an important note. Thank you. Okay, well, without any other comments, then I think that we can move on to the next one, or do we need to officially vote on no, or can we move on? And I guess I'm asking Mordecai and Claudette for that clarification.
I would defer to Claudette. I think I know the answer, but I definitely don't want to get it wrong while the recording is underway. So Claudette, what do you recommend?
If there's no further discussion and you guys want to go ahead and vote on this one, you can go ahead and formally vote. And this is the beauty about going one by one. David reviewed the initial request, and then we're going by one for the actual action to each item.
So do we have a motion?
Oh, this is Rebecca. I'll make a motion that we do not implement this suggestion at this time.
I'll second. Jamie, this is Dara Newton.
Thank you. Okay, so all ayes that are in agreement with not implementing the grades for their senior year on the application, please raise your hand or say aye. And do we have anyone that's voting no? Dr. Blake? Okay. I want to make sure that we have, that we record all of that. So Claudette, we have all of that correct. So with that, then we are voting to not do that. Move forward with that request. Okay, David, you want to talk about the second one? The cell phone number piece? Okay.
So the second one, if the applicant enters a phone number and identifies that that phone number is a cell phone, the proposal is to have a consent appear, allowing the institution to send them text messaging.
Do we have any questions about this particular item? Dr. Blake?
This is Michelle again, Texas A&M. I just know early on, David, you mentioned that there's some verbiage that says a student can opt out at any time. And I think that opt-out would need to be with the universities because you don't have a way of letting us know that.
Right, that's an excellent point.
So you might update that to just say you can opt out with individual universities at any time.
Chantel.
This is Chantel Blake. I have a question also about the opting out. If a student chooses to opt out and unsubscribe, I know there are laws around that. Would we not be able to contact them anymore, period? Or even if they went to a 2-year school and then later on, as we want them to decide to go to a 4-year school, how does that work? So my only concern would be, let's say they started a 2-year school and opted out and then or unsubscribed, and we would never be able to do it again, but I'm not sure.
Laura, I see your hand up, and then Angie.
Yeah, so my understanding of that would be that students can opt in or out, and provided that they're opting in or out with the institution, it would be institution specific, so it wouldn't be universally applied to all institutions. We currently have a custom question on the application to allow them to opt in or out of texting and robocalls. So I would certainly be in favor of having a universal question that all students were submitting so that we can remove that from our custom questions, provided that made sense for everyone.
I think this is Angie, Sam Houston State. As a follow-up to Laura's comment, I was wondering how many institutions already have this in place, like you already have a process for this, and if it's still needed or not for everybody, but for those who don't, if we could add it, and for those who do, if we have the option to remove the question altogether so that it's not seen. I can't remember with these if we have the ability to do that or not, or if it's there for everybody. With this question, David, would it be invisible to everybody, or would each
yes,
have
it would be visible for everybody.
Okay.
Scott.
We also have a custom question like Laura, and we'd be happy to remove our custom question if we got a universal question. So.
Thank you, Michelle. Scott, I think you had a question.
Yes, just a comment to what Laura had said. We also use a custom question, and so I could see some value in this for sure. So we can certainly remove that. Less questions, the better.
My question would the default, what Incarnate Word is requesting is that the default would be to allow rather than it being rather than the request, right? And they have to actually select that. And so that would be one of the things that I think we should visit about. I mean, all of the things that we do at Texas Tech, it starts with no, and then you opt in, we ask you the question. And I feel like that's, at least in my opinion, better for the student, because then they consciously are making that decision to text in rather than us assuming that. But I don't know what others' thoughts are. Laura?
Hi, Laura Isdell. I think if they have the choice to select yes or no, I would be comfortable with them like the question being phrased, choose yes or no. And then the other thing that's probably just worth mentioning is that just because the student chooses yes, if your institution doesn't do texting or robocalls, then you still don't have to. It's just giving you the ability to do that.
Jamie, just so you know, I see a hand raised for Louis Franco and a hand raised for Miguel.
Great. Louis, you want to start?
Sure, I would just echo Luis Franco with UNT Dallas, echo what Laura just said. And I think the other thing too, with the other presentation that we just heard of on ATV, just the clarification for students to understand basically what I'm being asked to opt in or opt out of different texting sort of programs, if you will, right? One from the institution and one from the ATV. So some students may go like, wait, I thought I just clicked yes or no. And then because I just enter a cell phone, now I'm being asked if it's okay for me to text. So how would those two overlap, if you will?
Good question. David, I think that.
So the ADV question, I think, is specific to the ADV chatbot. And this is more a general question about text messaging from the institution, but we'd want to make that clear. And as far as the default, I think we would probably want to make this a required radio button with no default so that they would make the selection on their own.
Great. Thank you, David.
Miguel had
answer your question.
I'm sorry.
Yes, in my
Miguel,
case,
okay.
I think Miguel had a question as well.
Yeah, and I think Miguel Bashleski from UT Austin. And I don't know if this is a question more of a comment. So thinking about our process at UT Austin, we have a number of communications that go out pre-application where a student is able to indicate or not indicate these preferences. If it was an optional item, I probably wouldn't include it on the application from UT Austin because we've got this entirely different process that works within our CRM to communicate with students. So I get a little concerned about it being confusing, that process. But I would agree that it's probably a good thing for the whole group of people. I just wish it was optional from the UT Austin perspective.
And just to confirm, David, and I know you said that just a minute ago, but there's no way to make it optional. It's either all in or no, right?
The phone number fields are on the profile, they're general, so it wouldn't be institution specific.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just sorry, one more follow up there, and I guess another concern related to that is, does every institution actively use text messaging? And because you're implying that that will be used at that institution if you're having to opt into it in a general sense. And I have concerns about institutions that simply aren't set up that way and students expect that to happen.
We would definitely want to word it appropriately to make it clear that some institutions may use this and some don't.
Any other questions or comments about this specifically? Okay. So are we ready to move forward and vote on this, or is this something that we need to take some more time to think about? And we would vote for April, which means it would delay, right, David? It would delay implementation if it was approved.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
If we vote, I'm sorry to keep calling on you. If we table this, and Chantel, I know you have your hand up, so I'm going to come back to you. But if we were to table this and move this to the April meeting, then that's just going to delay, if it's approved, right, implementation, if we were to move forward with this.
Right. We wouldn't move forward until we got approval.
Okay.
Right. It would generally delay them working on this because it's not approved by the committee.
Okay. Chantel, you had a question?
Yes, I'm just wondering, let's say if it was approved, would we be able, I'm just concerned about the wording. I'd like to see the whole process together. I'm uncomfortable voting to approve something that I have not seen from A to Z, even though I do know there's a time constraint. So I'm just wondering how that part would go, because we do use text messaging quite a lot. It's very powerful for us. And we do know that when students unsubscribe, 95% of the time with us, they never come back. And just that unsubscription at the very beginning. And like I said, there are laws around how, when we contact students by text and that kind of thing. So I wouldn't feel comfortable myself without seeing everything A to Z. However, you know, if we vote, then that's just fine. I'll participate. So my question is, so are we sure that we know what the whole process is A to Z? We know what the wording is. We know definitely the schools that use text messaging, how that would work if someone were to opt out, or if they are able to opt back in, what that would look like. So, I just want to know if we have those details.
Sorry, I think that's a very good point. So Dara, you have your question, your hand up.
Well, I was just, and I don't know if this really isn't an emotion yet, but I lean toward tabling. So there can be some potentially internal discussion from the committee related to wording, and then helping to educate universities, because this becomes a different way for each institution to have to manage the opt-out process once they start collecting, because it's coming from that and not a traditional process that they already have in place. Doesn't mean you can't apply what you already have, but I think there is also an education piece potentially there as this gets added to ApplyTexas. But I think it's worth internally a group maybe talking through language and talking through some of the points that we need to maybe address before voting in the April meeting.
I agree. Possibly this might be something for the communications committee to review. So Mordecai, I would ask, you chair that subgroup, so.
Yes, ma'am. Claudette, what is the feasibility of us working directly with the subject matter experts to pull them in?
So this question doesn't necessarily have to go to a subcommittee. It can actually just be reviewed for anyone who's interested. So what I'm hearing is that you all want more time to consider specific language around this question. So what you can do is anyone who's interested, and we can document that today on this committee, that's interested in creating that language. We've in the past had someone take the lead and then get with the other members, similar to what Laura asked for regarding the fraudulent applications. So you can say, I'm going to lead this, and we're going to have a little back-to-back email offline and be ready for the next committee meeting. And then you can reintroduce this, similar to how Mindy did it as well. So to your point, Dr. Blake, just kind of letting you know that this is not, you don't have to necessarily vote on this specific language because there is no language that's sufficient for everyone right now, but a group of you can go and say, we're going to revise, but we will need a lead to do that. And it doesn't, again, necessarily have to go under the subcommittee. It can go to a separate work group for that question specifically. So if you have someone who wants to lead it, Rebecca, I saw your hand raised. If you have anything, any question or anything, I just want to make sure that's included.
Oh, that's pretty much what I was going to say. I looked at the calendar while you were talking because I thought what I wanted to do is table it, see if we had time at the end of the meeting and try to work through some of this. Because David, how hard is this for you to change if we wait until April?
It wouldn't be difficult to change. I can try to mock something up on what it would look like too, if that would help, and take a stab at some wording.
Yeah, so does anyone else want to join David on that to kind of walk through some language that might be suitable to address some of the concerns you all raised? If not, David will come to the committee with language, and in the April meeting, you all will discuss that specific question, do some wordsmithing if needed, and then vote on the question at that point.
Please raise your hand if you're interested. See Scott Bennett.
Okay. Scott and Laura, did I see your hand as well? Oh no, you had a question.
Okay, you can include me on that as well, Claudette, please.
Okay.
And Mordecai, this is Dara. I would help too. I'm happy to help with that.
Thank you, Dara. Oh, Rebecca. Thank you, Rebecca. Anyone else? Okay.
Laura, you had a question?
Just a suggestion. I assume that maybe David has the ability to extract from custom questions from the institutions who have such a question. Maybe that would be a good starting place for language.
So what I'm writing in the notes right now, just for this action, is that this action will be tabled. I'm just doing a quick summary because we are short on time, but this specific item will be tabled for next meeting. You all will consider language. David will draft language and then work with Scott, Mordecai, Dara, and Rebecca to kind of offline to come back to the committee for the next to vote on this specific item at the next meeting. Sound good? Okay, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudette.
Thank you.
So moving on to the next, the Pearson test proposal, David.
This one is a proposal to add fields to collect the Pearson test of English scores to the existing test scores page. So that's the page where we collect ACT, SAT, or on grad apps, the whole list of graduate tests. So it would be adding this test to that page.
Any questions for David or comments? Okay, Angie.
So sorry. Do you have a listing of what all's there? I just can't remember off the top of my head right now what all tests are currently even listed.
It varies by application type. There are quite a few. There are some on the international application types. There's a whole list on the graduate application types. There's a smaller list on the US freshman, the undergraduate apps. I don't have them offhand, but what do you think, Rebecca, Barry? Maybe 20 of them total right now, but they appear, different tests appear depending on which application type is being filled out.
Okay. And how often do we get these requests? Do we just do it initially by what people have asked, or have we looked at like the general tests that were accepted, or?
Yeah, I don't think we've had a proposal to add a new test for a really long time. I think a few years ago, somebody had changed the scoring on one of the graduate tests, I think. And so we had to change that from one cycle to another. But as far as adding a new test, I don't think we've done that in a while.
I was just wondering how many people use that since it was a request from them and not an institution, correct?
I think this proposal actually came to Claudette. Claudette, do you remember? I think this came from Pearson to you. Am I remembering correctly?
If it came to us, it was a long time ago, but
This was a while back, yeah.
To your point, Angie, and from what we heard today about limiting different questions on the application, these are just additional questions students have to ask. But it's a good point in how often institutions use this information, if at all. We know that they use it, but how often they use it. So a lot of times these requests come in from institutions because there's something in the application that they want for their specific institution. So just making for those, we have a lot of new people on the committee, and we didn't have, by now we would be in a good rhythm, but because we didn't have our last meeting, we're in like this is our second new stage. But for everyone that's new, normally we get these requests in, they may be specific to the institution themselves, and for lack of a better word, want to selfishly add it. But if it's a benefit to the efficiency and effectiveness of the application as a whole, that's where you need to think about how it relates to everyone statewide and the student user and the institution's use of the application. So like we heard from Zach today, adding this additional information, is it really helpful, or will it be used? So that's a mindset we usually think about when you go through these different requests. And if it's information, and then of course the coordinating board has requirements to add on different questions based on their requirements as well. So that's where we get into that request and voting. So that's just something to think about as you're considering these next few. And I know we're short on time, so I don't know if you want to table them or consider it, but that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Claudette. So I think that's a really good point for this one, for the Pearson request. Is there anyone that wants to entertain the option of adding this, or would we like to vote on this or table it? And we have 11 minutes left until the end of this. So any thoughts from anyone?
It sounds like there's enough concern that we should table it.
Yeah, I was about to jump on in there. We like to give our body of colleagues an opportunity to chime in and engage, but we may want to table this item as well as table. We'll come back and report on the additional item that we'll be working on, David, with in regards to language on that radio button.
Okay.
And then what do we have left? We have the item from Claudette's colleague at THECB. Is that what's left?
Yes, from Mindy, the request from Mindy.
Mindy.
Nobles.
Yeah, I think you have 2 more. One from Mindy Nobles. That's again a revised. She provided the revised language. That's what's up for review and consideration. If you want to take time to look at that or vote on it now, so the tech team can start working on developing if it's approved. And then you have another proposal from Tarleton State University. It looks like that's a new one as well.
Yeah, so the first of those was, well, wait, do we need to take action on the Pearson tabling it? Is that what we're?
Yeah, it's going to be tabled. I don't need that.
Okay.
You guys don't need to vote for the tabling. So we'll just go on to the next agenda item, next request.
Okay, so the next request was the Perkins 5, adding a question that allows students that are applying to 2-year colleges to self-identify in one of the Perkins 5 special populations categories.
Angie has her hand, Jamie.
Oh, I didn't see you.
Oh, it's okay. Sorry, Angie at Sam Houston State. This is only going on the 2-year app, correct? So I don't really have a say in this. My only question was, and the change request that we got was the suggested wording, the newly updated wording that the subgroup had worked on, or was that still her original proposition?
No, this one was the revised. She met with a subgroup of a subcommittee or group afterwards. Was anyone on the call with Mindy to review this language and have anything to share?
I was on the group. This is Julia Vickery from Midland College, and that is the revised language. We went through several iterations of the language. A lot of the 2-year colleges have these in their optional questions, and the language isn't very standardized across the board. So since it's required for Perkins, we went through and put it through readability and some of those concerns that we had that students wouldn't know some of the definitions. So we tried to go back through, and Mindy did most of that and put it through some readability scales to make sure that it said what we needed it to, and encourage students to fill it out without feeling, I don't know, kind of called out, maybe be the best way to say that.
Julie and anyone else that served on this group, thank you all so much for your work and support. For the sake of time, Jamie, I go ahead and cast a motion that we approve the adoption of the revision.
Second.
Perfect.
This is Julia Vickery.
Is it too late then to add the feedback? This is Laura Isbell. It's just redundant. It's asking about the foster care piece in this question, and there's already a separate foster care question. And so for me, I would not have that as an optional answer, although I understand why they included it. It feels redundant to me as a part of the application. Otherwise, I can support it.
Okay, I'll tell you what, we can claim, is it possible, Claudette, that we can claim Zoom delay and recast the motion with the revision?
I don't know. I didn't catch everybody's vote anyway. I know you motioned, but I didn't catch as Julia had voted.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing from you, Laura, is that I don't know enough about the question and how it comes up in the application, because the foster care question, is it related to this specific question's related to Perkins? From my understanding, the other question is not, but that's my assumption. So does anyone else have any feedback on that? Because I think they're two separate questions, because this one's roped up under Perkins 5 and the other one is not. So am I correct in thinking that, or?
I think you are. Angie, I see Angie's hand. I'm so sorry, go for it, Jamie.
Oh, I was just wondering, the way it looks in here, do the students actually click and identify which situation applies to them, or are they just saying yes, in general, any of these apply, and then yes, I'd like information? Are they actually having to click which one applies to them? No. Okay, it's just a yes or a no.
It's mainly for outreach purposes. We can ask, and then that way we know that we can outreach, and then if they come in and qualify for Perkins, we know how to catch them. So it helps us to identify who might be Perkins eligible that doesn't know, and we're required to notify all students. So we talked about that a lot, and we're really concerned that students would feel put in the spotlight.
See, and to me, this is if they're Perkins eligible, whereas the others, I don't know if there's that specific distinction. I'm assuming there is Perkins eligible versus foster care, that they qualify for Perkins under these special categories versus if you're a foster care student, because I remember the extent of our foster care conversation and adding that information, and a liaison would be able to contact those specific individuals. So I see those as two different questions, but I defer to you all to kind of give additional feedback if necessary.
I think because it is part of the Perkins, and because they're not specifically having to say yes or no to each one of those, then I would lean towards it staying in there as written. but I'm a four-year school, so this doesn't exactly apply to me, but that would be my thought.
And all due respect on what was brought forth as a potential revision, I still see that the revision as proposed originally by Mindy would still be sufficient without having to strip away any elements. But I'm any of our two-year colleges feel any differently? Okay, if that's the case, then I will go ahead and move forward with my motion for the adoption based on the revisions as proposed by me.
Laura, does that address your question before we second? Anyone seconds?
Yeah, I'm looking at both questions in comparison, and I think that if you said yes on this new question, you're going to also say yes on the other, but that's not necessarily true. The opposite of that. So
Right,
I can
because
support it.
Great. The other question really is specific to foster care in general, and there's mechanisms that'll say, do you want resources? So it sends it to me in a different trajectory for both questions. That's my input. But so if there's no further discussion, I just wanted to make sure your issues were addressed. If there's no further discussion, it sounds like we have a motion. So I'm recording the notes and I'll defer to the co-chairs to continue.
Joya, you had seconded. Would you like to second that motion as well? Okay, so all in favor of voting for this, raise your hand, say aye. All right, we get that all captured. Is there anyone that disagrees? So any no's? Okay, with that motion passes. So I think at this point we would need to table, I'm asking Claudette, but we would need to table the other two requests.
I think you only have the one, and that's the one from Tarleton State University. This, David, do you want to review it? And one thing you should add in the review is how long it would take, because if you need to vote now, I think you need to vote today so you can get started on the question.
Okay.
This last one was the proposal to expand the option for institutions to include the parent information questions on application types other than the U.S. freshman. But on those other application types, if they do include it, it would not be required. Whereas on the U.S. freshman, if they include it, it's still required fields. Oh, and difficulty, this is a little more difficult than the previous requests that we've gotten. I would classify this as a medium level request where the others are much smaller.
For those of you new, when David mentions that, he usually says medium means there's more work for the staff to do. So you just, in your consideration of adding this question, it takes more time to add this question in the way that it's worded and the different mechanisms and on the different application types.
Any discussion, questions, comments? Mordecai.
Jamie, I was going to just say, I don't know if it's motion, but I was going to recommend that we table it to the next conversation if possible.
Okay, unless anyone objects, I agree, because I think that with the difficulty level, and there'll probably be some more questions that we need to talk through, and with our time constraint. Okay, so we will table this for future discussion. Mordecai?
Great job, Jamie. Thank you, team. It is now 12 o'clock. Really quickly, we have the discussion of potential agenda items. I was trying to keep track of this. It seems like we'll have a follow-up by the work of Laura Isdell that she's going to be reporting back to us on the next agenda. We'll also have Dr. Zach Taylor coming back and having a follow-up with us to provide some additional information. And I'm sure Claudette will lead those efforts. David Muck will be working with a group of us who are interested in hearing more about that radio button. And so that will be another item as well. Is there anything that I may have missed that should be a future agenda item?
Well, I
Go
think,
for it, David.
well, David, yeah.
I would like to know more about the institutional reporting that some schools would like, specifically what schools would like. And Zach had mentioned that in, I think, his presentation.
And I apologize, Jamie. I'm realizing now the AWS demo, are we just going to move that to the next meeting as well?
Claudette, I defer that to you. I know our meeting was shorter than normal.
Yes, it really would depend on the committee if you want to stick around. I know we scheduled this from 10 to 12. If you want to stay on, we have some hands up. Does anyone pose staying on a little bit of time to hear the AWS presentation? Okay, so you all will stay. I'm seeing some nods. Okay, David, are you ready to, and Angie, you have your hand up real quick.
I was just going to propose if we can make our next meeting longer than 2 hours, since we have a lot to cover, to make sure we can get through everything.
We will. The agenda seems short, and I apologize. We had Zach Taylor just join yesterday. I did not realize he was going to provide such a thorough presentation. I'm very thankful for it, but it did cut into our agenda a bit. So, very pros and cons here, but if you all are willing to stay on a little longer, we would welcome that presentation from David, and we will dedicate a specific agenda item to Zach, to the others that Mordecai mentioned as well. So that'll work out for that. David?
Okay. Are y'all seeing this PowerPoint?
Yes, we see your screen.
Okay.
It's not in video, presentation mode, though, I don't think.
Okay. So coming out of the, just a quick review, coming out of the usability studies, we've had 2 done over the last several years. One was internal at the University of Texas, and then Zach's findings also. Some of the recommendations that came out of that were improve readability, optimize for mobile, reduce clicks, improve the copy functionality, and shorten the completion time. So what I'm going to do is go through some screenshots of what the new site looks like, new sites. I want to go through the application site, the counselor site, and the administrative site, and talk about some of the changes we've made and why we've made them, keeping some of these recommendations in mind. We've tried to do our best to address some of this. So the applicant site, here's the homepage, the login page, and here is what it looks like on mobile. It's much more friendly for mobile than the current. Again, a view of the core questions on the application, what it looks like on a desktop versus mobile. Essays on desktop and mobile. Oops. The profile, we've made significant changes to the profile. What we tried to do was take all questions that were in common across all application types and move those to the profile so that applicants only had to fill that information out one time, rather than going through the same questions over and over, and with a goal to reduce time to complete the app and reduce the number of clicks applicants need to take. So a lot of the biographical information, citizenship, emergency contact, high schools, previous colleges, and the residency section have all been moved to the profile, as well as visa information if we've identified them as an international applicant based on how they answer the US citizen questions. The My Applications page, we added branding, school colors, and then links to core questions, custom questions, and essays. And additionally, if the school takes scholarships, there's links on these application cards to scholarship core questions, scholarship custom questions, scholarship essays. Some other changes we've made, as Zach had mentioned, the existing account creation takes a lot of fields. We've simplified that to 3, their name, a self-selected username, and their email address. And that's all they need to create an account. At that point, they would be sent an email to verify the email address they entered, and then their account is created. The school search is no longer a pop-up. It's an inline field that they just type the name of the school in, and a list comes up of the high schools or colleges, depending on which search they're using. Application creation is all on a single page. They select the type of application, the school, schools and majors, the semester, and there's a lot more exploration that can go on having that all in one page rather than them paging back and forth between the different pages when they're creating an app. The Texas residency is a similar change. It's, as I mentioned, it's in the profile, but it's also a single page rather than them going back and forth. Applicants select their response to questions, and based on those responses, the appropriate follow-up Texas residency questions come up. Dual credit applications are now a distinct application type. The way dual credit apps have worked for several years is those schools that have opted into receiving dual credit apps, it's just a separate question on the US freshman app or the 2-year app. Instead of that separate question, we just made it a distinct application type for those 2-year schools and 4-year schools that indicate they accept dual credit applications. This first year, it'll be the same set of questions that appear on the US freshman app or the 2-year app respectively, but we think that this gives us the opportunity in the future, if the committee decides they want to look at what questions are appearing on the dual credit app versus US freshman, or the dual credit app versus 2-year, this sets us up well to make those changes if the committee decides to do that. The copy feature I mentioned was another thing that came up in both usability reports. Now core application data is shared between applications and is updated in real time. So if the applicant has an application to both UT Arlington and Texas Tech, a US freshman app, let's say, for example, and they update a field in one of those applications, the same update will carry over to the other application as long as that application hasn't been submitted yet. Once the application is submitted, all questions are locked at that point and transmitted to the institution. But a lot of times what will happen is they'll copy an app from one institution to another, and then make a change in one of those or an update in one of those, say to an extracurricular, and then forget to carry that same change over to the other. And we think this will help a lot with that. And we think removing the explicit copy feature just streamlines the process and again reduces clicks for the applicant. Essays are also now just accessed from one location on the application card. And here's just some screenshots. As I mentioned, the school search is now an inline search. A shot of the Texas residency page, it's all one page now. Application creation also is just one page now. Dual credit is a distinct application type. Okay, moving on to the counselor suite. Some of the changes we made for the counselor suite. Again, it's been optimized for mobile. We made some improvements to the tool that our Education Service Center representatives use to authorize counselors in their ESC region to make their process and their updating a little bit easier. We've improved the connection to districts rather than individual high schools. When the counselor suite was first implemented, the connection was to individual high schools. And then a few years later, we added the additional district level representative that would need access to all high schools in a district. And our data, the UT's database is not set up perfectly for that scenario. And we've got some workarounds in place in the current system, and we've just made that whole process, that connection to districts, a whole lot easier for both district level reps and the ESC representatives that authorize them. Another change is district level counselor results are returned as one list now. Previously, a district level representative would need to switch from high school to high school to see the results for each high school. We've changed that so that if they're a district level representative, they now get all those results returned in one list, which they can then filter down. If they want to filter down to a particular high school, they can do that. And then on both the district level access and the individual high school counselor access, the ApplyTexas and FAFSA application lists have been merged into one. So the current site that's live right now, a counselor will go in, they can select to see all the ApplyTexas apps at their of students at their high school, or all the FAFSA apps for students at their high school. Well, we've merged that so that they've got it in one list, and they can see, oh, this student has applied for FAFSA, but doesn't have any admissions applications on file, or vice versa. They've got ApplyTexas admissions apps, but they don't have any FAFSA apps. We've merged those lists as that was a request. This is the home page of the counselor suite. This is the district connection that I mentioned now. It'll be easier for ESC reps to authorize by district. Prior to this, they needed to go in and select each individual high school in a district. And this will just make their lives a little bit easier. And then here's the view of that a district level counselor would see upon logging into the counselor suite. Again, you can see that this now combines all the applications from different high schools in their district. This particular one is Austin ISD. And this is an example of what the merged view looks like that I talked about for high school counselors. So for this particular applicant, they can see that, yes, this applicant has FAFSA application on file. Here was the completion date and the process date. And then here's a list of all the admissions applications that are associated with this same student. And I should mention the plan is, in addition to this FAFSA application, they'll be able to see TASFA completion statuses as well. That's a fall goal. Moving on to the administrative suite. Some of the changes we've made, again, we've optimized it for mobile. In the new site, we're going to give administrators read access to our high school and college databases, so that if they need to look up particular high schools and see what codes we have on file for them or addresses we have on file for them, or if they see something that's out of date, they can ping us and let us know, and we can make those updates. We've added a system status indicator to the landing page after administrators log in. We're adding the ability for administrators to update transmission preferences. So if they need to take themselves offline real quick and not receive a 6 p.m. delivery, they can go and do that themselves. We've got some schools that like us to hold applications over the Thanksgiving or winter breaks. They'll be able to go in and define date ranges if they'd like that to happen. We're trying to add a lot of self-service items. We're working on improving the management of both majors and custom questions, and especially the connections between majors and custom questions. The main majors list, we're working on making that searchable and bringing back more information, trying to ease the display of that, as well as the download of those majors. We're adding the ability to see a real-time display of changes to a custom question. So if an admin is going in and adding a link to one of their custom questions, in real time, they'll be able to see on the screen what that new custom question text would look like. And then in general, we're improving the navigation on the administrative site. Here's a shot of the homepage. Oops. An example of what our high school and colleges database looks like. So in this case, there's Lake Travis High School. Here are all the codes we have on file for Lake Travis, the region it's in, the TEA region, the district it's in, the TEA code, and address information. This is the status page I was talking about. So at a glance, when an admin logs in, if there are ongoing issues with any of our various portals or processes, if we're having a problem with a particular payment processor, or if we had a transmission failure to NSC, they'll be able to see at a glance that that's an ongoing issue or not. Here's the transmission settings I talked about. Sorry, it's so small, but they can opt in or out to different transmission times. We plan to expand these in the future and add even more transmission flexibility. They can choose which code they want to receive for previous colleges. Rather than going through our help desk to do that, they can go in and make that change instant. And then if they want to block a certain date range, want us to hold transmissions for a week or a few days, administrators now have the ability to go in and do that. This is a screenshot of the major list, the major display page. You can now show hide details on particular majors, see if there are any specializations. If it's a grad major, see if there's any specializations associated with it. If there are any custom questions associated, any essays, those would be listed. And then on the individual major page, this is an example of the linking I was talking about between majors and major specific custom questions. Now we're returning a list of all the major specific custom questions we have on file so that you can link directly to those on the major page. And we've got the reverse in place as well. So on the major custom question page, you can choose which majors you'd like that particular major custom question to apply to. And this doesn't come through well, but this is the real-time question preview I was talking about. So you type the question text in here, and up here's a preview of what that that question would look like. So in this case, I added some bold text and a hyperlink. And then here's our spring timeline. So starting March 29th, we want to open up all three portals, but in particular, the administrative and applicant portal to alpha testing. We had some really awesome testers last year, and we plan to reach out first to them to see if they're interested in helping us do some testing. Then April 19th, we'll move to beta testing for all institutions. And then May 3rd, open access, and we plan on having some training sessions to answer any questions on how to use the new administrative site and do some demos of some of the new functionality. And that's what I've got.
Thank you, David. That was great.
Questions or anything? Or does everybody want to bolt?
I guess the only question or thought that I would have is that this is all going to come with a URL change, right? So our institution need to be prepared for a new URL, even though, you know, so when we open up the new app, we'll have some probably using some of the old URL and some using a new URL.
Well, yeah, we're going to want to transition pretty quickly to moving the new site to our existing URL.
Okay.
We're still working out the details of that, but yes, we'll definitely send an update on that.
Okay.
Rebecca, you have your hand up.
Oh, you're muted.
Yep, because I unmuted myself to talk and then I muted myself back. David, thank you for the presentation. Could we have a copy of your presentation so that we can study it a little bit more and in bigger? Perfect.
Yes.
That's my first question. Second, on the alpha testers, I know that as someone who's been working on the committee and is very interested, I'm definitely interested in us being able to be invited as an alpha tester. I imagine there's some others on the committee who would be as well. Will we have that option?
Yes, I should have mentioned that. If you're gung-ho about helping us with that, please reach out to the, I think the administrative box is the most appropriate place.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Looks like Julia has a question.
You really quick. So this is way outside my wheelhouse. Stephen asked this question, but I know my IT department is. David, where do we get, if we map you know, to our system? Where do we get a list of new fields or new mapping, or will there be changes to that, or will y'all communicate that to our IT folks? Or I know they're going to be asking me, so.
We definitely will. I should have brought that up. So as far as transmission, there's going to be no changes to the EDI you receive. We definitely want to move towards expanding the formats that we offer transmission in, but that won't be a right away thing, but that is definitely on our horizon. We've heard requests for CSV, for JSON. We want to expand those offerings, and that transmission update page that I mentioned, at some point in the future, we would, you know, add the ability, hey, what format do you want to receive transmission in? The current specs for the EDI transmission are on our current administrative site, and they'll be on the new site too, but those are not going to change unless some of these new questions get added, in which case those new fields would be added to our transmission.
Great. Any other comments, questions?
Rebecca, you still have a question?
Oh,
No.
Dara's hand is up, I see.
Okay, this is going to be a silly question and is really applied more toward banner institutions, and maybe David too. How does this affect Aleutian and the TCC committee, and how quickly do they start working on that for banner institutions and the load process that they typically deliver? And Michelle, I'm gonna put her on the spot. Maybe she knows more than me. Nobody knows. Okay, that's fine.
Well, I would think that if the EDI is not changing, there would be no
There's
need
nothing that would, even with the addition of a dual credit application as an application type.
We're sending it through the EDI in the same way for now, because we didn't want y'all to have to make that change.
But I got confused a little bit. I tend to be staying there today. Did you say, David, that it will be a new URL or it will not be a new URL?
We're still working. We're still working that out, whether we want to make the change immediate when we roll over, or let some applications finish up on the old site and just have a link. Hey, if you're applying for this semester, go here. We're still working that out, but we will send an update on that.
Thank you.
Oh, Angie.
All right, that made me think of one last question. And then this would be from the communication standpoint. Is there anything that we need to be doing on our end to inform the users and help support the change, or will ApplyTexas take care of most of that transition for the student experience?
We'll be putting messaging on the current site, and we'll be sending out messages through our current boxes, the administrator box. We've got lists set up there, the counselor list we've got set up. I think it's an ongoing discussion with the communications subcommittee, how some of those other groups are reached.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. Thank you, David. So there was an offline conversation with Claudette. I'm thinking, Claudette, we maybe had this conversation before, maybe after the holidays. All the days run together now. But in regards to, there's going to be some new staffing that's going to be happening at TCCB that will directly be supporting communication efforts. Is that correct?
Yeah, we needed to talk because they were very new. That position's a new position at our agency. I'm not really sure if that new communications person might have a role in helping the committee. That was a task that I need to figure out with that specific position. But to David's point, there are existing listservs that we have, several listservs that they have specifically, and then we have one at our agency to let people know about some changes. Marketing is not our area, and I don't see, I know we're trying to make communications more, a lot more communications, but this is to me, a big marketing push that I don't think our UT Applied Texas staff has the scope or capacity to do. So it's going to be something that our agency is going to have to try to do. I will tell you, there is no dedicated budget to do marketing campaigns either. So we'll have to create and work with the communications committee to think about how we're going to roll this out. And the timing that David shared is really important. So we probably need to meet our agency, the communication subcommittee, UT staff, and anyone else who's interested in helping push this information out, because we do as a committee need to take more of an active role in sharing that information. So if it'll help to share that information. So not necessarily your responsibility, but that's what we need support on in getting the information out to all the stakeholders across the state.
What I'd like to recommend then is if there is an entity that you are aware of that you believe is crucial that we get this information in their hands, maybe a listserv of some kind. We don't want to make any assumptions. If you could email me directly, you all should have our roster contact list. So please email me. That way I can present that to our communications team and make them aware of that. And then we can add that a part of our efforts.
Okay, with no further comments, Mordecai, David.
Should I send this PowerPoint to you, Claudette?
Yes, please do, and we can send it out to the to committee members. Thank you so much, David, for that presentation. If there's any other questions, please let David or the co-chairs know.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jamie. I believe we are back to potential agenda items, but I think that we've already covered that. Were there any other items that needed to be mentioned? Otherwise, we're going to talk about our next meeting date.
And I know there's an interest in extending the meeting. Is 3 or 4 hours? I mean, I'm going to defer to you. If we can't come to a consensus now, we'll send out a survey, again, another doodle poll. But are we looking at 3 hours, 4 hours? What do you all suggest? Because it's your time commitments virtually.
I'm going to recommend 3 hours.
Okay.
That's my recommendation. Does anyone feel any differently?
I think it's 4.
You think it's 4? Okay.
Unless we have a really short agenda.
Okay.
I would rather a schedule for 4 and get out early than.
Y'all want to say 8 to 12? Would that 8 to 12 be a good time frame, or 8:30 to 12:30? Okay, it's about 12:30 now, so we'll say 8:30 to 12:30. Is that good with everyone? Okay.
Yeah, that works. If we can start earlier, I was thinking we have to stay at the same time, but no, that works.
No, we can start earlier.
All right, so there we go. So 4-hour meetings, and for the next one, and then in terms of date. So if everyone can quickly look at their calendar, and Claudette, you may also want to lead us. Is there any, now that we're in a virtual space and still not meeting face to face, are there still certain dates that we need to stay away from that you're aware of that are other committees are meeting on those particular dates in April?
Really, this is where we defer to you all, because your time schedules in April look really crazy. So I think we have Easter holiday in there somewhere maybe, but we're open to any dates. Because we're virtual, we don't have to depend on conference meetings, so conference space. Normally we have to look around the board conference room, but now we don't have to do that. So it really is your time, whether we want to do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever preferable date is on your calendars. And we can send out a survey with those dates. But is there anything we should stay away from? Any time frame we should stay away from? That's what we need to know.
Does anyone know when TAC is scheduled? Is it March?
I think it's the April. I think that's April. I actually just requested to go to that. So I think it's April 12th or April 11th.
Because it's a super conference. I can't remember
It
It's
is.
free.
It is on the 12th, the 13th.
And acro actually is at the very end of March, so that's not a conflict this year.
April, I think Easter is on April 4th, so it's normally Fridays is going to be a bad day. So the first, let's see, I'm imagining vacations and stuff will be the first week in April. So we're looking at the second week in April, probably between the 6th and the 9th. And the 15th, I think the 15th is that a Thursday?
Thursday.
The 15th and 16th, those are Thursday and Friday. I don't know if you guys want to do Fridays. Then we have the 19th through the 23rd. These are Mondays through Friday. And then the 26th through the 29th. Or any of those other dates, because I'm eliminating the first half of the week on the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th. And then I'm eliminating April 5th because that's right after Easter holiday. So I'm looking at the 6th through the 9th, the 15th or 16th, 19th through the 23rd, and then 26th through the 29th.
I'd recommend as early in April as we can, since we have a number of things we tabled today.
Okay. Would you all be opposed to the 6th, April 6th or 7th?
I'm not available on the 6th, but I don't know that we want to get into everybody's particular calendar situation. But I mean, I just wanted to put that out there. But the 8th is perfect for me.
8th. Okay. We'll look at the first week, first and second week. So it'll be either the 6th to the 9th or the 15th, 16th of April.
Will not do that one. I am off.
For which date? Sorry.
Oh, she's asking?
Yeah, I'm sorry. You have your.
You had unmuted, Leah.
Yeah, just because you said it, I just don't want to include it in the survey, but we can. But those are the dates I'll look at the first 2 weeks of April. Is that good? All right, we'll do that. Okay, thank you guys.
All right. Well, I think that we have what we need for all the faithful few that remain. I saw many leave the meeting with straws in hands and toothpicks, and but you all made it. So we thank you. Thank you.
Make sure you motion to adjourn, and you need a second as well.
There we go. So at this time, the time now is 12:39 p.m. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
I motion for adjournment.
Okay, now we have some engagement. All right. Kevin Davis motions. Who is the second?
Michelle Walker.
Michelle Walker is the second. All right. If everyone can at this time just mute yourself, and we will conclude as we log off of live stream and recording. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.